Change in Color is inclusion, diversity in faces, cultures, and stories. A break from the traditional narrative in media we see every day. I'm India Johnson. Join me as we highlight the beauty and the struggle. Change in Color.
My name is Helen Lee, and I am a third year here at UCLA, and I'm creating my own major, which will be called Human Rights and Technology, and I expect to graduate with that in 2019. I immigrated to the United States when I was 5 years old with my twin sister and my mother, specifically because the economic circumstances in which we were put in Korea were very terrible. So we were forced to relocate to the United States. We grabbed one backpack filled with a few of our favorite things, and we came with that backpack and a blanket. That experience affected me because that was the very first time I realized that things were not good, especially when my parents had painted this picture for us that the United States would be a great place for us to learn and live. We first walked into our apartment and we were sitting on cardboard boxes and milk crates instead of a dining table. And I asked myself, what are we really doing here? And I realized that things were a lot harder than my mom wanted us to realize. One of the largest things that has affected me and my childhood was that I was born with a congenital jaw deformity that just progressively got worse, especially when I was 14, 15, and 16. So my jaw deformity, the way I explain it is that it is an underbite, but the average underbite is about 6 to 8 millimeters, and mine was close to double that. And the hardships that I had with that is that I constantly told myself that I wasn't comfortable in my own body, that I didn't like what I saw in the mirror. And that led to a lot of complications within my prime teen years when you're expected to excel socially or that you're expected to have friends. And I was not able to build on any of those because these traumas were so deep-rooted inside of me. The model minority myth is a societal expectation put on minority groups, namely Asian Americans, that they are expected to do 3 things. 1, be self-reliant. 2, keep their head down and work without vocalizing their opinions. And 3, excel despite those circumstances. And the way that it has impacted my life is that realizing that most Asian Americans, including my family, come from such difficult circumstances in hopes of finding better. When there are smaller everyday problems like maybe failing that one exam when you're expected to excel, because we come from such harsh circumstances, I had to be grateful for the opportunities and the fact that we had a roof over our heads, no matter, even if I wasn't proud of that roof or that place that we were. I felt as if I was never in the place to really vocalize because I would always ask myself, but what about my parents? It felt ungrateful for me to be able to express that sort of discontent. And that's why I inherently had a problem talking about my problems. While I believe that my experience with my jaw deformity is a greater analogy for the way that the Asian American community sees struggles, sees hardship, and sees mental health problems, because I learned to really shut those out, and while they just festered inside of me, I was so afraid to ask out for help that the problems only magnified. I believe that the stigma against mental health and the model minority stereotype are so deeply intertwined in that there is this expectation where we have to be perfect or we have to be flawless. And mental health struggles are rooted in being vulnerable with yourself and others and admitting that life isn't perfect and life isn't good despite what you put out there. In my home country, South Korea, the main element or the main aspect of going to school isn't to really live in the present or really discuss the problems that the youth have, such as sexual assault or such as depression or mental health or anxiety. Any of those elements, the main focus that these schools have is always on to the next step, such as going to a good university, going to a good grad school, getting a great profession, and just moving on. It's always very future-oriented. The problem that breeds is that we don't live in the future, we live in the present. My experience with mental health is that I feel that I'm not in a place where expressing my struggles to my parents comes from a place of ingratitude. And that has bled into a lot of different problems that I've been facing, and my inability to really vocalize and put a voice and put a strength and a power behind the struggles that make them so real. For example, I dealt with a lot of sexual assault and coercion and attempted rape back in May of last year. And my inability to vocalize them and my focus of making sure that these problems didn't exist made me really suppress these problems because I felt so alone. Right now, I have worked towards being an activist and being visible, especially in these struggles, so that people will have an understanding of that they're not alone and that they have resources to come to. All these individual lives have different struggles and different colors of pain that we all endure, but because we're all so quiet about them, we're led to believe that only we really struggle through this.